everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here today to film my February wrap-up. This will be a discussion of all the books that I haven't talked about in any of my other videos that I read in February. I talk about the books that I read in February that I haven't discussed anywhere else before. It's going to be difficult this afternoon, I can tell you that right now. Before we get started, I want to point out my new t-shirt that I just got this weekend from Old Navy. Love Old Navy t-shirts, and I think this one's really cute and very positive. So I wanted to point it out. So let's just get into the book, shall we? I read a total of 16 books in the month of February, which I am very, very pleased about. I've discussed how many books of those came off my physical TBR, and a bunch of these ones are books that I finished at the end of February or I read either on ebook or as audiobooks, so I haven't talked about them anywhere else before. So the first one of those that I would like to discuss is a science fiction novel. It's Brown Girl in the Ring by Nalo Hopkinson. I buddy read this with Britta at the beginning of the month, and it fits for Black History Month because Nalo Hopkinson is a Jamaican-born author. And this book, Brown Girl in the Ring, it's classed as a sci-fi, but it really is probably just more speculative fiction because it does have fantasy elements as well. And it tells of a dystopian future where the city of Toronto has basically been abandoned by the rich and privileged, and everybody that's left are basically minority people, and they are left to their own devices to survive as best they can in a city with crumbling infrastructure, no electricity. You know, they have to barter, they have to grow their own food, they have to, basically go back to natural medicine. And our main character is Tijan, who lives with her grandmother. Her grandmother is training her in the use of natural medicines, and she is a single mom trying to raise her baby. And we follow her as she deals with her ex and this mystery of he has gotten involved with like the local gangsters, and there's some mystery around some of the activities that this ex-boyfriend has gotten up to, and Tijan has sort of gotten involved in that. There's a lot of Caribbean folklore rolled into this book, elements where Tijan has some abilities, shall we say, that have something to do with Caribbean folklore, and we're sort of exploring those around this theme of a deteriorating city and what happens when sort of people use people are trying to use their magical elements to sort of become the leader or the head of a criminal element, sort of a thing. I'm probably not explaining this very well, but the book itself I thought was kind of a mess. I did not enjoy this book in the end. I thought that the plot was kind of all over the place. Tijan does not act in a way that I think anybody would act. I thought there was a sort of this romance angle was sort of forced into the story in a way that didn't make any sense. Tijan, our main character, does things towards the middle and the end of the story that contradict her character development up until that point, which I find extremely frustrating in novels. So overall, I did not enjoy this book. I found it really frustrating, and I would not necessarily recommend it, but I will say it is Nalo Hopkinson's first novel, so, take that information and do with it what you will. The premise of this city and everybody, all the basically rich white people abandoning it and leaving it and just sort of leaving all the minorities there to fend for themselves, I think is a really excellent commentary on segregation and racism in our cultures, but the premise did not bear out the rest of the novel. Okay, let's see what I read that was more successful than that. And that is a nonfiction young adult book that I read also for Black History Month. This is The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind by William Kamkwamba and Brian Mealer. I talked about this book quite a bit in my Black History Month tag. This is so excellent. This is the story, William's story, growing up in Malawi to a poor farming family who a famine strikes their country, and they are all starving to death in this country. And they can't afford to send William to school any longer, so he's just at home. He's a very smart boy, and he ends up finding some books at a local, like, sort of traveling library type of a deal, and he gets interested in trying to build a windmill to bring electricity to his family's farm. And it's all about, you know, his inventiveness in what he's trying to do, how people, you know, say he can't do it, he's just a kid, he's never going to be able to, you know, bring this idea to fruition, but he does. And it's just amazing, the story of how he overcomes all the barriers that are placed in his way, from this famine where people, like, literally are starving to death all around him, the you know, his family's inability to send him to school when he's clearly a very intelligent kid, and then what happens to him after he builds this windmill. And he doesn't just stop at building a windmill for his family. He continues to try to build windmills to bring electricity to other people in his community. And so it tells his whole story from his, you know, his youth days all the way up through him going to college. It's a very heartwarming story. I sat down and read this all in one go on one afternoon, and I highly, highly recommend it. It is just fantastic. It also is available in an adult version and a children's picture book version. So, you know, pick up the version that you would prefer the most, but please do read this story because it's excellent. I then read another ebook, and this is a book that was on my classics that college-bound students should read before they go to college, which a teacher gave me way back when I was in high school, and I've been working on diligently since I was a teenager, and I only have, I think, 2 books left to go on that list. But I had 3 books left to go, I had 2 books left to go, and this is one of them. But I added another book back to it, so I do still have 2 left to go. But the one that I read in February is Sergio de Bergerac by Emond Rostand. And I read it on an ebook, as I said, and I did not like this book. I did not like it. I watched the movie Roxanne that's based on this, the one that stars Steve Martin, back when I was in high school. I love that movie. It's so good. But the play itself, I did not like. I thought there was way too many characters. I tried to listen to it on audiobook. I couldn't figure out what was going on. There was too many characters. So then I picked it up on ebook, and I still was, like, super confusing. And then the ending, that ending was trash. I don't care if it is a classic. That was a trash ending, and I hated it. So yeah, not a good one for me. Another book that I read in February, again with Britta Bowler, see a theme going on here, and also for Black History Month, this is The Color of Law, A Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America by Richard Rothstein. Richard Rothstein is a white author, but this book details how Black people specifically, but people of color in general, but Black people specifically, were systematically excluded from the best housing, the housing closest to businesses and jobs and amenities, how they were excluded from getting loans to purchase housing, how they were excluded from gaining wealth through home ownership, and how those things were set up in policy and law through the federal government, through the state government, through the local governments, and down to the realtors. How every level of governance was set up and designed to exclude Black people from the ability to own homes and from the ability to live in the most advantageous communities, and that those structural systems have led to Black people having less wealth, less access to the things that you need to succeed if you're talking about in terms of wealth, increase in wealth. And how they have led to many of our communities being segregated by race, still to this day. This book has so much important information in it. You can see I've tabbed, and these aren't even all my tabs. I've removed so many tabs since I finished the book to use them elsewhere. But there's so much important information in this book, and I think that you should read it for that information, but I did not think that this book was that well written. I think that the author, who is a lawyer, laid this book out like he was going to argue a case in front of a judge. And so every example of every instance of this sort of systematic racism that he could find, he put in this book. So there's just example after example after example of the same point that he's trying to prove all through this book. It became very repetitive and not very engaging to read. So this is quite dry and, like I said, repetitive in places, but the information that's in this book is so important and so informative, and really I learned a ton from this that I didn't already know. And I've been reading a lot of books about sort of the history of racism in this country, but there was stuff in here that I did not know. And again, that period of time between Reconstruction and the Civil Rights Acts in the 60s, a lot of crap was going down during that time period that doesn't get taught when we're in school in America. And a lot of that stuff is in this book. So read it for the information, but just know that it is probably not going to be the most engaging thing that you'll ever read. Another thing that I completed in the month of February is this romance novel by Georgette Heyer, Bathtangle. And so I really like Georgette Heyer books. I know that she's problematic because of she was racist against Jewish people. This book did not seem to have any of that I noticed in this particular book. And I read this whole book, which is the story of Lady Cyrano and the Marquis of Rotherham, who are like childhood neighbors. They like live on adjoining properties, and at some point in the past they had been engaged, and Lady Cyrano calls it off because they are like, they can't be in the same room with each other without arguing and like just going head to head. She's very strong-willed, he's very arrogant, and like sort of like he knows it all, and typical alpha aristocrat from this time period. But then Lady Cyrano's dad dies, and her cousin inherits, because of course she's a woman, she can't inherit, and so she can't stay there anymore because her cousin is like a dumbass. He is. And so she can't stand it because she knows more than he does, but she's not allowed to like run the estate anymore. So she and her dad's widow, who's not her mother, it's this young stepmother that she has, who's a super nice person. They take off to Bath to go live in Bath and sort of do what aristocratic ladies do when they're in mourning, when they can't really go do anything else. So they're just going to retire to Bath and like live a quiet life. But Lady Cyrano, she's not real good at living the quiet life. So adventures ensue at Bath. It's this enemies to lovers kind of a romance with lots of, sparks flying, and, another suitor comes into the play with Lady Cyrano, and he's sort of a super nice guy, but not really temperamentally suited to be with Lady Cyrano, who, like I said, is very strong-willed. Anyway, it was very enjoyable read. I really love Georgette Heyer. I spent the whole time that I was reading this book thinking, I think I read this at some point in the past, because it was all very familiar to me. But I still enjoyed it. So if you like Georgette Heyer, if you like Regency romances, I think this is a good one. I mean, it's not modern romance. So if you're looking for a guy who's not overbearing and is sort of tuned into like women can be, their own bosses, like don't read this book, right? But if that doesn't bother you, and if you're okay with the book attitudes that were in the time period when that book was written, you probably like it. Let's see. I did also read another romance, Just Like Heaven by Julia Quinn. That's book 1 in the Smith-Smythe quartet, which is sort of like a follow-up to the Bridgerton series. And Just Like Heaven was just okay for me. It was not as good as the original Bridgerton books for me at all. It was enjoyable. It was fun. I liked the main characters. They were really great. I did not like the side characters so much. I found them a little bit irritating. There's some sibling bickering kind of thing going on with a couple of younger sisters that I just like, not my thing that I enjoy. So it was not the best one I've read, but it was also enjoyable, and I don't regret reading it. So do with that what you will. And then I did have one bail in the month of February, and that was Zadie Smith's On Beauty. I got to like page 70 or 80 in this, and I was just like, you know what? I just don't care. I just really did not care. So this takes place in Boston, and it's this family where the wife, the mother is she's Black, I think of Caribbean ancestry, and I think her husband is white, and he's a university professor, and they have this son who like has some kind of a failed romance and comes back home from being off in like England or somewhere, and they have another younger kid living at home. And so it's this family story, and it's sort of like an academic, I don't know, like academic stuff happening because he's a professor, and so there's all this academic politics happening, and the wife is, I can't even remember what she does for work, and I just didn't care. I just did not care, and I didn't care about all these academic politics. I didn't care. This family, this son was irritating and like stupid and like teenage angsty kind of crap that I just didn't want to read about. So yeah, I just couldn't see like dragging my way through the rest of this novel. So yeah, too bad. So that's what I read for the month of February. Did really well, feel really accomplished, feel like I got through a lot of stuff, had some ups and downs, some goods, some bads, and that's the way that it goes sometimes. And I appreciate that about my reading. I hope that you all read some wonderful books in February. Let me know in the comments down below what your favorite book was that you read in the month of February. I'd really like to know, and I will talk to you later.